Thank you everyone for coming. We have a few people online and we have our panelists here to talk about things that have come out of the comp plan. So I kind of wanted to talk about how we got here as a result of the comprehensive plan. So in the comprehensive plan, we talked about resource protection, and we broke that out into natural resources, historic resources, and agricultural resources. And one of the things that was talked about in the comp plan and things that we heard during our public outreach sessions revolved around shifts in modern agriculture. So, one of the trends we're seeing is smaller farms, and what do these shifts really mean for a local municipality? Are there things that a municipality can build into the zoning code, code enforcement, things that are hindering local agriculture that we can address as a municipality through our toolbox? I always talk about our planning toolbox, and we have tools that we can use to help incentivize or help agriculture be successful in our community. So that's really what we're here to talk about, is some of these shifts and challenges that farmers have, and also local businesses that are related to farming. So with that, I guess we'll have introductions from our panelists here. If you could just turn on your mic.
I'm Joel Newhard from Newhard Farms. I'm the 5th generation farmer in our farm. We are located just north of South Whitehall and North Whitehall in the town of Brooksville. We farm roughly 3,500 acres in about a 15-mile radius of our home farm. And we grow grains, mostly corn, soybeans, and a little bit of wheat. And we also have a vegetable sweet corn business in the summer.
Chad.
Howdy, Chad Butters, founder and CEO of 8 Oaks Farm Distillery in New Tripoli, Pennsylvania. We use the grain that Don and Joel grow. So how fun is that we're actually on this panel? And I think that was a happy accident, actually. But yeah, the corn that the Newhart's farm grows is a portion of that is turned into bourbon, and that makes it a little more fun. But that's what our whole thing is we're trying to kind of complete an ecosystem right there in New Tripoli where we can grow the grain, mill the grain, ferment, distill, enjoy it. And then now we're trying to complete that ecosystem loop by taking the distilled product, the byproduct of distillation is called stillage. And that stillage is going to be fed to livestock that we have on our farm that's going to fertilize the land and go back to growing some of the barley and kind of complete that loop. And then lastly, you'll be able to enjoy that beef at our own restaurant. So that's what we're trying to do, is just really kind of complete an ecosystem locally, the whole entire loop. And Don and Joel have been a tremendous asset towards getting that done. We always appreciate their relationship.
Yeah.
Hey everybody, my name is Kegan Hilaire. I am the Small Farms Consultant at the Rodale Institute. So we provide technical assistance to small farmers now across the country, especially with small beginning farmers. It can be anything from writing a business and marketing plan to putting a crop plan together, working on figuring out your markets. But I also run my own certified organic vegetable farm in Emmaus, Pennsylvania called Blackbird Farms. We do basically 110 varieties of different vegetables that we sell through CSA or to local restaurants in the Lehigh Valley.
Thank you, everyone.
We also have Madeline online.
Sorry, I forgot.
Madeline, if you're able to unmute yourself and just kind of introduce who you are.
Yeah, sure. Can you guys hear me okay?
You're good.
Okay, awesome. Hi, everybody. I'm the coordinator of Buy Fresh, Buy Local of the Greater Lehigh Valley. We actually have a lot of partners here on the panel board today, so that's really cool. And if you haven't heard of Buy Fresh, Buy Local, we're a program of the Nurture Nature Center that was started back around 2008, 2010, by a woman named Lynn Pryor, who's really passionate about bringing together the local food system and helping to promote it and connect consumers to those resources. And so since then, we've gone through different kind of focus areas, but it's kind of like a brand name. Where the brand name is currently owned by PASA, Pennsylvania Sustainable Agriculture, and there's different chapters around the United States. So I represent the Greater Lehigh Valley chapter, and we do a lot of marketing promotion. We have a website, and then our core is our partnership base, which is our network of local food professionals in Lehigh Valley. That includes farms, markets, restaurants, specialty products, and different categories like that. And we do different things like producing food guides, putting out newsletters, and we just really try to help our partners to connect with consumers and then also educate about the importance of eating fresh and local foods. So thank you for having me here today. I'm excited to learn more from our partners.
All right, so we're going to transition to an exercise that we did at our last meeting. We have some questions, and we're looking for preferably one-word answers. If you have 2 words, just put a period in between so that it'll come in as a 1 word on the screen. I don't know if you can see it, but you go to menti.com on your smartphone, and the code is 55215040. It's pretty small up there, isn't it? Five 5040. So the first question is, what is agriculture? One of the things that we're looking to, when we structured these meetings, we tried to answer the where and the why at the first meeting. We're trying to focus on what and who in this meeting. So we have some partners here and potential resources available. So that's kind of answering our who. So now we're kind of transitioning into the what. So if you have an answer, go ahead and start plugging them in. Perfect. I'm going to transition over to run the machine and let Chris take over.
Yes, it's shared online. So anyone online, you can just go to, if you open up another browser or even from your smartphone, you can just go to menti.com and type in that code. This is great. There's a lot of answers.
So you can kind of see the of in there. So if you have a multi-word answer, just put periods in between each word.
And if anybody in the audience needs any help with it, I can let you borrow my phone if you don't have a smartphone or can't find the site. We'll leave it up another 30 seconds, and then we'll go to the next question. But seeing a lot of different things here. This is great.
I think some of I love that somebody put landscape because we're calling this plan. So thank you, whoever put that. Chris, did you put that in?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't plant that one. Okay. All right, we're going to wrap up this one and move to the next one. You should just be able to click next. Yep. So the question is, who benefits from local farms?
There we go. So the way it works is if there's multiple answers, the words get bigger. But yeah, everyone, community.
I'm going to leave this one up just another 30 seconds because I think consensus is everyone. And so the idea here is we're hoping to get you guys thinking about agriculture in your community, kind of the different perspectives, what it means to you, and we'll hear a lot of different ideas here from our panelists on what agriculture means to them, how they work with communities every day to promote a lot of this. Okay, we'll kind of wrap up this one. You want to go to the next one? So the question is, what does the future of agriculture look like to you? So this is where we want you guys to get creative. What do you think of 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, the future of agriculture?
So the uncertain and endangered are definitely something that was worked into the comprehensive plan. We talked about how farmland is disappearing in this area, typically due to development pressure, which is one thing that the Lehigh County program has built into their ranking system. The part of the goal here is to figure out ways to, we won't be able to stop everything, but perhaps integrate farming and agriculture into development so that we can preserve what we can, is really the goal of what we're doing here tonight.
Regenerative, I like seeing that on there. Okay, another 30 seconds for this one. Okay. So we can come back to this at the end here. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Chris Stroller. I'm the long range planner here at the Township. As Dave mentioned, we're excited about kind of the direction of this landscapes plan. We are very fortunate tonight to have our panelists here. I've gotten to know some of them, over just the past couple of weeks, and I have certainly learned a lot just in the few conversations and little bit of information that I've learned about some of their businesses and their plans. One of the things I'd like to know, we kind of introduced yourselves already, but I'd like to know really how you got started. What was, where do you come from your background? Is it in farming? Is it not in farming? I think it's an interesting story. I'm finding it's a lot different for everybody. Joel, I think we'll start with you. You probably have the easiest answer to that.
Sure, yeah, sure. My family has been farming since about 1900. So like I said earlier, I am the 5th generation. I have 3 boys and a nephew that are all somewhat interested in farming. So we're hoping it continues into the 6th generation. And so, yeah, I grew up with farming. I actually went to school to become a mechanical engineer because my dad was extremely concerned that there wouldn't be a future for me. in farming, because back, 25, 30 years ago, he was worried then that the land is disappearing. And, I said, we farm over 3,000 acres. We do not own that. We deal with over 50 landlords that own those properties in that, again, 15-mile radius. And so the uncertainty of farmland is there every year facing us all the time. So I actually, got another degree in mechanical engineering, did that for a little while, and was fortunate enough to come back to the farm after I got laid off at that job. And we built our retail business, and then things have progressed since there. And I have kind of taken over that retail business, and we diversified our farm. Basically, we can't just grow corn and soybeans. We have to do something different, and we're constantly looking to do that, with the next generation.
That's great. Chad, how about you? How'd you get into farming?
Well, let me do some audience participation, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
And feel free, our online friends, to join in. First of all, I want to just say thanks for even doing this. Super cool that we're even doing this. We have, I don't know, 10 people in the room. Can't wait for this to get a little momentum behind it and get 20 and 30 and 40. I think that's one of the most important things we can do is educate our community, right? So I'll get to your question, I promise, but I'm going to do it in a circular way here. So I was in the military for 25 years, and we moved every 24 to 30 months or so. So we've moved around the United States and around the world as a family. And prior to that, as a young kid coming up, we moved every couple of years as well because of my father's profession. So I say all that to say that here is the one place of all the places that I've ever lived in my life that we have such an abundance directly around us of farms and farm products. So that is highly unusual. And I think maybe that might be lost on folks that might have come from here. You might take that a little bit for granted. I would take it for granted over time. But we have, the things that Don and Joel do, all the way to community support agriculture programs that we were just talking about, eggs, honey, pastured pork, everything is here. And if you think about it, in my mind anyway, it's kind of on the periphery of the Lehigh Valley. So you have Lehigh Valley Center, and then you have surrounded by these agricultural things that are right here, to the point that you can literally drive to a dairy in the middle of the night and get fresh milk and just drop money in a box and leave. That is phenomenally unique to our area. So I love this area. How I got integrated and interested into farming is a relatively long story, but I'm going to make it brief. We are first generation, although I would ask, does anyone here have farming in their background, in their lineage? Their grandfather, their grandmother, their great-grandmother, their great-great-grandfather. I would say every one of us could probably raise our hand, because at some point we all were farmers. And that's what was really interesting to me, is returning back to that. Having a little bit of control of your own environment, I think, is an interesting thing. And putting and growing something quite literally from the ground up to provide to the community, which is one of the big answers on there. I think that's what farming is all about. So I'm a proud first generation that, maybe we skipped a few and we're bringing it back.
I love that. We all eat. We all have to get something from a farm at some point. But yeah, that's great. Kagan, how about you?
So I too am first generation, kind of just in my 5th year down the farming rabbit hole, really. I went to Temple, got an economics degree, did business to business sales, did that for about 5 years. My wife was in grad school at the time, and I ended up doing all the cooking at home. And there's 2 ways to get better at cooking, and it's better techniques or better ingredients. And I was not going back to school for culinary. So I just started buying. We went to it was before kind of organic was at Walmart. It was a local only grocery store that just procured from places around the city of Philadelphia. And we ended up getting pastured eggs for the first time. And I just couldn't figure out why did it cook different? Why did it look different? Why did it taste different? And kind of just went down that rabbit hole, started with the eggs, obviously, and then kind of worked my way through livestock and why we pasture and growing grass and then silvopasturing, and really just back-ended my way into vegetables. Because, I mean, like they just said, everybody eats. So if there's one place you can start a conversation with anyone, it's always going to be over food, because you're both going to be doing it that day. So it was a really cool way to connect with a community was up on that board. I think it was just a really good place to start. And like I said, I just kind of back-ended my way into farming, especially vegetable farming. But so grateful we did.
That's great. Madeline, how about you? What was your spark to get involved in the work that you're doing?
Sure, yeah, my story is way less interesting. I studied engineering and environmental studies in college, and I was super passionate about looking at systems and how the different aspects of like our society and how things come to be and why that is, and really interested in like sustainability topics and looking at our changing weather and climate issues and what plays into that and the landscapes. And so I went to Lafayette College and I got involved with the Lafayette Farm, and I did a lot of volunteering on the farm. And then also I participated in a lot of different food and sustainability discussions and food forums. And I talked with different food organizations. And then this position opened up, and I was connected with Nature Center and had volunteered and interned with them previously, and they knew my background, and so I kind of was like super grateful to be able to be a part of this community space and be able to learn more about local foods, and then try to tie in my background with environmental topics and promote the benefits of local fresh foods for everyone and the environment as well. So yeah, pretty quick. I'm still at the beginning and hope to explore it and have more to say down the line.
It's wonderful. I love the tie-in, kind of the agricultural environmental side of things. That's one thing that Dave talked about with this plan being their landscapes plan, really the focus of this for the township, and how all these sort of things come together, and that they do have more of a symbiotic relationship. They don't need to be looked at individually, and that's what we're trying to accomplish. Next week is actually a little plug for our natural resource meeting, where we're going to talk more detail about things like waterways, woodlands, and that sort of thing. The next question I have, this could be a long one. And we can maybe kind of go through, I want you to think about maybe the highlights, and then we can always maybe come back to a couple topics. But I want to know, what are the biggest challenges either faced by you, your producers, your clients, the partners that you work with related to agriculture? Joel, we'll start with you. Yeah, really, what are the biggest challenges of today that you see you face?
For us, quite simply, is just finding the parcels to farm. Uh, Again, we are so spread out, and the reason we're so spread out is the farmland is disappearing so fast, and just having more. We have a certain business, we have certain amount of equipment and employees, and we're a certain size, and to keep that whole system going, I need a certain amount of land to farm, and that just is always a challenge every year. Is as the landowners get older, they lose their touch to the farms. They get passed to the next generation, and that next generation says, do I want to rent it to the farmer, or do I want to sell it to a developer? And until we can generate more money into farmland preservation or another avenue for them to understand the value of that land, they're going to just easily sell it to the developer, and they're going to cash in. I don't blame them one bit. I own some property myself, and I wouldn't want to just turn that over, to my next generation. That land has value, but until the farmland preservation values become high enough, if they're only paying 10,000 acre to preserve your farm, and developer comes to you and says, I can pay you $100,000 an acre, what's that person going to do? They're most likely going to sell it to the developer. And me as a farmer, the revenue we generate off an acre of land, I can't pay $100,000 an acre. There's just, we're on such different levels. I'd love to buy another farm for my kids to inherit and things like that, and to grow our sweet corn on our own land that we own. But I'm at such a different level than the developer is, that I can't even come close to competing to those values. And unless the farmland preservation value is high enough to get close to that, most people are going to say, I'm going to sell it to whoever. So that's obviously a challenge. And, another challenge, I guess, as day to day is the congestion of the people for me to move my equipment around and things like that. We deal with that. But it is what it is. We're glad to have the people on the other side, because I have a retail business, and it's a wonderful place to have a retail business because there's lots of people here. I visit places around the country or just in Finger Lakes, and I look at the farms there, and they have a little farm stand, and there's hardly anybody there because there's nobody around. So having lots of people is,
Blessing and a curse.
blessing and a curse. Yeah.
So for clarity, you mean kind of because your operation is so close to where people are all the time, you're talking about like moving equipment on local roads and just being able to cross the road to get from one field to the next. And yeah, you're kind of right on the fringe of where there's a lot of population.
We often say, my dad and I, we farm curb to curb. I mean, we're farming in people's backyards, and that's just the reality. But the average person, if we get in front of them on the road, they're just pissed at us. The average person's, why is he on the road? Well, I'm just trying to get to my next field and produce a crop for you, But so those are our two biggest challenges.
Chad, how about you? What would you say, and this could be kind of for your business and maybe just a continuation of that?
No, I think for me, it's fairly easy too. It's education. It's education for myself because farming is hard. I found out over the course of the past just few months even. So just trying to understand how to take care of your soil, what buzzwords is there anything really to, and what's just a marketing buzzword term? I think there's a lot of education that we need as consumers to make smart decisions about where we get our nutrient dense foods, right? And one of the first things, again, Joel just hit on it, and it's a blessing and a curse. I would lean more towards the blessing side a lot of times. Again, this is just a product of the green valley that we live in. We have incredible operations surrounding us that are integrated with us, much like Joel's talking about on the roads, that we have a customer base right here. So we should have the most informed, educated people on farming and what farming can provide us because of our proximity to the farmers. And the best thing you can possibly do is just buy local. Let's reduce that carbon footprint from California to here, and let's just buy here. Let's get used to seasonality of things. It's okay that you don't have a tomato in February. No, let's get used to that. Let's adopt and support and go out of our way to be a little inconvenienced to support local farms. So it's not a one-stop Walmart shop, but you are supporting a true no-kidding family right here in the Lehigh Valley. And importantly, a sixth generation, which I'm coming for you, by the way. I only got 5 more generations. I'm coming for you.
Thank you. Kagan, do you want to talk about challenges that you face, but also maybe you work with a lot of farmers who are starting to kind of, small farmers getting things going, and maybe some of their challenges as well?
I think the first one is going to be a repeat is definitely land access, especially for the small farmers. If anyone's looked at housing markets right now, if you see a house with 1 to 5 acres, please let me know, because they don't exist anymore. There are no plots for small farmers to exist on anymore. You either are leasing a huge chunk of land or a relatively huge chunk of land to a small vegetable farmer, or you're basically setting up a homestead. So the disappearance of those small plots or even just spaces for I like to call them market gardens. They're really like even less than an acre. We're talking about doing $100,000 to $150,000 gross in vegetable sales on acre with only hand tools and human scale. So kind of also getting people to readjust, probably on the consulting side, getting people to readjust kind of what their idea of what a farm is or how much space a farm needs to be productive. On the vegetable side, I have friends that are easily doing $150,000 to $200,000 on an acre, and that's wholly possible at retail with with just some space and basically a well, you can, electrical hookup, and you can almost get that going. So the land access side, especially on the small parcels, but also the technical assistance. That's kind of where we came in at the Rodale Institute. The consulting team was built to provide technical assistance to small farmer or to farmers in general. To really, there's a lot of information out there right now, and kind of what is the correct, or what is, again, like Chad said, cutting through the buzzwords and the greenwashing and getting down to what are the actual technical practices that need to happen on farm to be organic, or to take care of your soil, or to accomplish any of the things that you're trying to do on your farm. So probably technical assistance and land access for sure.
Yeah, it's great. I think that's, I know that's been eye-opening for me to see, the scale. I mean, you could be talking about 3,000 acres, farming, and still there's land access issues and issues in getting to those properties. And then there's the same issue for 5 acres or less than an acre. Madeline, can you talk about maybe some of the challenges that you've seen, either working with different, organizations or different producers and things like that, and what's kind of the main challenge, or maybe why people are even reaching out to you in your organization?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think a lot of what I would say to this is kind of echoing what everyone else has said. Education is definitely a huge issue, and like, I mean, I can speak from my own perspective. Like, my family didn't really go to the farmers market. My mom would just go to the grocery store and, like, get her haul of food, and we never really questioned where it came from. I was fortunate to, like, be able to be provided food and healthy food from my family, but um, whether it was local or not local wasn't really a thought. And I know a lot of kids, like, it wasn't until I was in college that I was really asking those questions of myself, and then I got involved in the local food system. And I know a lot of kids and our partnering organizations will talk about how, like, children won't know where their food comes from, or like how it's processed, and because it's not really a question and people don't really think about it anymore, and families are so caught up in, like, their day-to-day lives, they're not really thinking about that. And then greenwashing is, of course, an issue in, like, grocery stores, because they're being told things are fresh and they taste good, and there's just these buzzwords that some families are looking for and not really, like, digging past that. So education is a huge thing. That's one of our, like, focus points, I think, through Buy Fresh Buy Local, is really trying to break down those stereotypes and misconceptions that have been also passed down generationally, and get people to really think a little bit more. And I also like what Chad said about the about convenience. So, like, we have talked to a lot of different partners for grant purposes and trying to, like, gather insight to be able to produce resources and things that reflect those conversations. And convenience is definitely a big thing that comes up. And I know that a lot of the farmers I've talked to have had to change their marketing models and product models to kind of reflect that need for convenience, because people are so used to getting whatever they need whenever they want it, with our technology and industry and everything that has shifted towards that kind of model. And so I know a lot of, like, prepared foods is becoming more prevalent, like shifting to, like, market style shopping and those kinds of things. So things are definitely changing, but I think, yeah, just breaking down those misconceptions and providing a lot more foundational education for why fresh and local foods are so important for so many reasons.
That's great. I think, yeah, it's amazing. You can really, anything you want is 24 hours away, it seems like, in most areas. And then you start to beg the question, well, where is that actually coming from? Especially when it's something that you're consuming into your body. Talking about these challenges, what do you see as opportunities, really, for maybe existing agricultural practices, businesses, new businesses? And not everybody necessarily knows the details. Joel, you probably know the most about South Whitehall, but if you could talk a little bit about what are some of the opportunities you see, things that could potentially happen that people aren't really thinking about. We'll start with Joel and kind of work our way down.
Well, when I think about opportunities, again, I go back to there are so many consumers close to us, right? And that is great. And just it just tied to the educating them though that we are here locally, and just having that amount of people in this area is a great opportunity. We also have great soil. I travel the United States and see different people farming and struggling with terrible soils. And we have some really good soils, especially here in South Whitehall. Out of the acres that we farm, probably 1/3 of our acres are right here in South Whitehall. We farm a good chunk of ground here, and that soil is very productive. People don't always realize that, and I think they take that for granted. And unfortunately, what I've seen in the Lehigh County area, they tend to build the biggest warehouses on some of the most productive soils, and it's extremely frustrating. And I get it because it's flat, it's close to an interstate, but I think some other municipalities and things just were not looking at how productive those soils were that they just paved over, and we'll never get that back.
Good soils grow good warehouses. I know it was kind of yeah, it was a little shocking to us. I know we were looking at some of the soils in the area, and Dave and I were looking at the maps, and we start to realize, wow, I mean, there's incredible soils everywhere. And we started to look, well, what's there? What's there? And houses, warehouses, in pockets of the township. But this area years and years ago, I can understand why it was populated and why there was a big interest in living here because of the quality soils and the good farming. Kind of, Chad, to your point, we all started as farmers at one point, whether just to feed ourselves or feed a local market. Chad, your thoughts on opportunities for the township, this area?
Yeah, I think I just visualize. I'm from South Carolina, so I got to start slow and kind of taper off here. But I just visualize a kind of a bullseye, right? And just think of the whole valley and think of the bullseye as kind of the population dense areas. And then there's kind of concentric rings outside of that. And as you get, I don't know, 15 or 20 miles outside of town, you get into most of the farmland, I suspect, is in that area, right? So there's a role to play for the farmers like Don and Joel and smaller farmers. There's a role to play with the land that's available there. But there's also a role as you get closer and closer to the center of town. There's a role for everyone to play, whether that's as a consumer, whether that's as a backyard gardener. There's a lot you can do on a small amount of ground, right? So if you do have ground, just know there's a lot of people that are looking for that. And so maybe there's connections there. Maybe there's some sort of a program that can be implemented that connects landowners that have small plots of land that might be available for, folks to come in and do small gardening kind of operations on, or vegetable gardens or different things like that. High tunnels, those types of things start to come to mind as well. But I also think that we have to solve the convenience factor that we've hit on a couple of times already. We have to make fresh local food convenient to the population. And if I had the brain power to do it, I would do it. But I know there's people in this room and beyond that are much smarter that could figure this out and come up with some sort of co-op system. And maybe that's where South Whitehall starts coming into play, is a co-op system that's not just a farmer's market. A farmer's market's great, but let's face it, that's a lot of farmers trying to be at one place at one time, and they got a lot of other stuff to do. I think there's a lot of farmers that would support a system that will get you the food on kind of a retail wholesale kind of a strategy, as long as you have a facility that's nice and clean and has refrigeration and everything else, where the community can come and get the local food just as conveniently as they could at other places. And I think, again, it goes back to education, because there's so many times that you will see things that are presented as local that are not local. So pay attention and do more than just a little bit of superficial digging on what it is that you're supporting. It feels great to support local, but let's make sure you're actually literally doing that and not just kind of falling for a marketing scheme. So it's our responsibility as consumers to get out there and do a little bit more digging. But I think specific to South Whitehall in your area, where do you fall in those concentric rings? The outside is the manufacturers, the producers, the farmers. The inside is the consumers. in between there, there's some opportunity. And I think that's what it is. It's cooperatives that bring that food to the community.
That's great. Yeah, when we first started this plan and we talked about agricultural resources, I started to scratch my head and think about, well, what are we talking about here? I mean, we have a lot of farmland, but we also have a lot of built out neighborhoods. We have some warehousing, we have some commercial, we have a lot here. But I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. We're kind of this transitional township, where there's a lot of density very close to us, and there's a lot of people that live right here. But then we're also right on the cusp of some beautiful farmland and some really great opportunity to continue agriculture in this community.
And just real quick, I just want to add one thing. Maybe as part of, and I'm naive to the process of negotiating about warehouses, I'm sure it's pretty intense. But maybe as part of that negotiation, okay, Mr. Warehouse person, you're going to buy 50 acres of land for this warehouse. You've got to carve off 10% of that and have as community access gardening or what have you. It's, again, it goes back to that. It's such a finite resource, and to pave over it, I mean, that's just there's plenty of other places to pave. I lived in El Paso, Texas. You can do a lot of paving out there.
Kagan, I know you're not as familiar with South Whitehall, but as someone who has seen a lot of different, farmers in different areas, what do you see as opportunities, and especially, what would you love to see in this area?
Actually, I think the fact that it is kind of a transitional place, I think is one of its best opportunities, especially I'm going to speak mostly to the small farm, vegetable farm side, where if you have access to water, whether that's well or city, or we use a pond at my farm at the seed farm, and an electrical hookup, and you could probably get a farm going. You're going to have to bootstrap it for a little while, but the fact that we're not in the middle of Tioga County in a 1,000-acre preserved area, like it makes it so much easier to get a farm like that going when you have some of the infrastructure nearby. The other part too is there was a statistic that small farms, which I think the USDA classifies under 50 acres, spends 75% of their money within 50 miles of their location. So it's not just providing to help the farms, it's providing income for all local businesses, that it's also staying and circulating within that local business. We use local hardware stores. The farthest we go to get anything is really Lancaster. And a lot of our produce gets sold right back to some of the people that we bought some of our supplies from. So it's kind of helping everybody within that community, all small businesses. So yeah, I think the fact that it is transitional and that we do have that customer base is huge, especially we can't really store vegetables for very long. So we need to harvest them and we need to get them sold. So we need people around to do that. So I think that's probably the biggest opportunity, since it really doesn't take all that much to get going and to get a small vegetable farm up and running there.
Yeah, that's great. I didn't think about that. Just, supporting your local farmer, but your farmer is also supporting your local businesses as well. Madeline, that's a good kind of transition into some of your work. What do you see as maybe some of these opportunities that we could do in, our communities, in agriculture, and maybe connection points?
Yeah, I mean, I think this discussion is a great first step, and bringing people together to like share insight and also to identify areas for connection, collaboration, and then also the gaps that can be possibly filled by different resources and partnerships. So I think, yeah, just continued discussions. I'm excited to continue to talk with you about how we can look at municipal planning and how we might help to educate around that. But also just like highlighting the importance of sustainable and local agriculture and food. And one thing we've recently been talking about in our social media networks and beyond is the aspect of local farms, not only as like providing food, but also providing green spaces, and how important that is to the like changing landscape, and the importance it is to like public health and provide, and the local weather, and providing resiliency for storms. And there's just so many reasons why, rather than paving over something, to have a green space, but then a green space that produces food, like that's absolutely awesome. And that helps to alleviate a lot of current issues that we're experiencing. So I think, yeah, just really continuing to educate around that and then having these discussions and taking notes and then highlighting those important voices of our farmers and the people that are experiencing these things firsthand is really important.
I swear I did not tell her to talk about local landscapes for this, but I love that you kind of went there and talked about the, one space serving multiple purposes. This question kind of is just a continuation of that. This is for anybody. What do you see, direct things a municipality can do to kind of either support our existing farmers, preserve farmland? I mean, Joel, you kind of talked about it. We need to preserve farmland better, and part of that is just making sure that the land is affordable. So if there's things that we as a municipality can do, if anyone wants to.
Sure, I'll chime in. So we farm in lots of municipalities, and if not to single out one particular place, but we farm down in Lower Macungie. They have chosen down there to purchase a lot of big, large tracts of land, and I don't know at what point they've done that, but they have a decent amount of farmland, and then they put that out on bids to local farmers, and you can have the opportunity to farm there. But they, as a municipality, went out of their way to spend their money, or taxpayers' money, to actually buy some nice pieces of land and say, look, we're going to keep this from being developed because we own it, and now we're going to rent it out to farmers, and they can grow crops on it. So I think that would be big if you have the resources to do that. Again, you're competing against, though, the giant warehouses and things. And I have no disrespect or the people that own that land and sell that to the warehouse. I get it. Why wouldn't you want the highest dollar for your land? So until, again, you come back to the farmland preservation and getting those values high enough, and it takes the community to support that through taxes, unfortunately. You got to raise the money somehow. But to get that at least somewhat close so that landowner goes, oh, maybe I don't need to sell it to him. I could preserve it and allow some farmers to rent it and grow crops. But right now that gap is so huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's about being competitive and just being. Right now, it almost seems like it's not an option unless it's your determination to say I'm going to preserve this farm. When it comes down to dollars and cents, we're so far off, and it's about kind of raising it up. It seems like just to be more competitive, be a viable option for people to even consider. And I think I love the example kind of it's hard enough. And as you say, as an established farmer in the area, farming 3,000 acres, to continue to acquire the land or keep the land that you have, it seems like the biggest challenge. And let alone a new farmer, a small scale farmer, or someone like that. Anyone else have thoughts on municipal specific things that we can think about?
Again, I would just throw in something like this is, thinking about the future. Oftentimes we're very reactive to what's going on right now and trying to solve the emergency that's in front of us. So I think being proactive the way that you guys are doing with these types of programs, I think is super important. I think the community coming out and, getting word about what's being discussed and how important it is. I think, education is the key to this whole thing. So I appreciate you putting this on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for coming. The last question I have before we open it up to the audience is really, we kind of started this in the beginning with our exercise, and what does the future of agriculture look to you? Maybe not just in South Whitehall, but agriculture in general. Madeline, let's start with you, and we'll work our way back here.
For what the future of agriculture looks like?
Yeah, in your mind, if the sky's the limit of what would you love to see as the future of agriculture?
Well, I guess I'm not often thinking about my dream because I know that it's not as feasible for what that is. But I guess definitely diversified farmland, and for people to recognize how crucial those maintaining healthy ecosystems, healthy soil, and how that's directly connected to healthy communities, healthy people, that not being separate categories or separate considerations, that all being considered as one thing, I think is really important. And with that would come change, and it would come different focuses and value systems, and people would then be focused on buying fresh and local and supporting local farms, and understanding that when they purchase fresh and local foods, they're also, like what we were talking about earlier, are directly supporting a local farmer, a local farm family, supporting the preservation of that green space, of that ecosystem, soil health, like how connected all of this is. So I think at its core, it's a change in value system and understanding of what like healthy communities and people look like. And then just lots of pretty flowers and you pick and food system everywhere, and like food co-ops and farmers always working together, and there not being so much competition, because I know that it's so hard for farmers to survive in our current economic climate, and a lot of farmers are working like 3 or 4 jobs. So them being able to focus on what their passion is and not having to like work day in and day out. Yeah, I don't know. I guess that would be pretty ideal to me.
That sounds great. That was something I kind of have learned, especially at your last point there. Of people are busy, farmers are busy. I was trying to get in contact with Kegan for a few days and wasn't getting back to me. And then I realized you are farming. You're busy farming. So there's a lot that goes into what all of you do every day. Kegan, what do you think future of agriculture? And I mean, you can be pessimistic if you want to be pessimistic.
I try to stay optimistic, and luckily the people that I work with tend to keep me pretty optimistic, especially people like Madeline. But I keep joking, we're going to make shirts that say "Get smaller, get out," like flipping that Earl Butz "Get bigger, get out" on its head, and saying we don't need 10,000 acre farms. We don't need mega corporations that are running. We need small farmers doing it in their area. We saw this during COVID. The people that were most able to react to food not being in the grocery store are the people who were closest to you growing it. So building our communities up to be more resilient in times like that, especially with climate change and all the other things going on, but getting people to get smaller, to get more local. But then also I think too, that would help kind of expedite that process of whole cost accounting, where we're not looking at a $100,000 or a $10,000 acre. We're looking at that $90,000 difference and saying, what is the opportunity cost for losing this space? Is it worth $90,000 to lose that green space, to have a park, to have somewhere that you can get outside or grow food or connect with your community? Is it worth $90K anymore? I think that would change that value proposition a lot. So hopefully that. And then again, farmers working together. Nobody has to be competitive. Because we're all trying to feed the same people. So there's so many ways that we can work together, and just trying to get farmers to communicate more often, I feel like, is my biggest thing, is just trying to connect people. So hopefully more connections, whole cost accounting, and a lot more smaller farms.
That's great. Thank you.
Also, sorry, I work for the Rodeo Institute, but organic also, whether certified or not, but again, just that bottom up kind of meaning of organic, not necessarily getting certified or doing any of those things, but really whether you're building your soil or you're building your people, your community, it should be from the bottom up. So thank everybody for coming out, because it's a great first step.
Yeah, I like that. I like, the kind of organic in both terms of what you're saying of, the kind of the organic relationships and farmers working together and working with their communities, and the community coming out. I, appreciate everybody coming out here on a Tuesday night to listen and participate. And I know we were at an event at the Rodale Institute, and, hearing the governor talk about the future of farming being organic, and just having it be more of an option, not just for the consumers, but for the farmers interested in, transitioning. I think that's a lot of your work too, in helping to break down those barriers. So, Chad, what about you? What do you think of the future?
Let's see. That is a big one. I would push back maybe a little bit on the organic, only because I think let's talk when we have big issues, we can't solve them with just small thoughts and small bumper sticker slogans or anything like that. We've got to have complex, difficult conversations. What we're talking about right now is the Lehigh Valley in this area, and we're really blessed to have so much abundance. But I just mentioned El Paso, Texas. They don't have that ability. They don't have the ability to even farm 3,000 acres in grain, right? So they still want to eat grain, and they still need to eat grain. And we've all agreed that there's less and less land, so we have to have more and more yield, right? So we can't have everything that we want sometimes. We have to understand what non-GMO really means. Is it really that spooky? Maybe. Maybe it is sometimes, maybe it's not sometimes. We have to feed a world of 7 billion people. So we have to think about things beyond just the slogan and beyond just the feel good and just beyond the bumper stickers. And we have to think about some of the hard things we got to solve. And it's just not easy. It's not as simple as just saying, hey, let's just do this. What I've learned recently is every farm is different and they operate at a different scale. They operate under different conditions. And there are a ton of farmers that if I asked them to operate the way I want to operate, they would just simply go out of business because they can't in their environment with what they have, they wouldn't be able to operate that way. So we have to make room and space for all those solutions, right? Because that's what it's going to take, I think, in order to do that. So that's, I'm thinking about this in a bigger way. The only thing I'm asking is that we come to the table with open minds and with a willingness to be persuaded when we listen to different ideas and different thoughts, and understanding that we have a world to feed, and that's not easy. And it's definitely not easy as you continue to shrink land and whatever you think of climate change that seems to have real and significant impacts as we build more warehouses. So yeah, there's big problems to solve, and I think we ought to roll up our sleeves and get to work.
Yeah, it's great that we have kind of this participation for us as planners, and to start to think about this for our community is, it's very difficult to sometimes get to that end road. And what we're trying to do is figure out what those questions that we need to ask are, what those resources are. One of the things I want to kind of ask then of the group is, talk more about resources and people. Joel, what do you think as far as the future? You kind of talked a little bit about, what you would love to see for your future and your family. And as kind of a, you're a member of this community, whether you don't live in South Whitehall, but very close, what would you love to see as the future for this?
Well, the easy answer, of course, is saying, well, just keep everything, all the land that we have, don't build up on that anymore. But again, as a landowner, I realize that's not realistic. But I feel like I'm sitting on the other side of the fence of, we're not a small farm, right?
Mhm.
But so we are a large farm, but we are feeding thousands of people. All that grain that we're growing is going mostly to Lancaster County to go towards feeding animals that feed everybody here in the New York area and all thousands of people in this area. So to keep that going, you do need a lot of land, unfortunately.
Mhm.
And I'd hate to be pessimistic, but that's probably not realistic in this area. We'd love to keep some large tracts. It'd be nice if there would be a way to zone still some tracts, large tracts, to say, hey, this whole area, we'd like to keep agricultural. But at the same time, you can't take that value away from that landowner without compensating him, right? That wouldn't be fair. You can't just in your large plan say, oh, well, now we want to make this large tract of land zoned agricultural. That wouldn't be fair to that person. So, in my ideal world, yeah, we'd love to see more land. We realize that's not going to be the case. That's why we're diversifying our farm to grow sweet corn and to get into that. And will my kids grow more vegetables probably one day in high tunnels and things? Yeah, they might. I'm hoping not to have to do that. I like, driving our equipment and farming in our larger scale, but that may not be the reality.
Yeah, and I mean this plan, it is our preservation plan, and part of that, and that's, we really appreciate you being here, is how do we preserve what we have, what we're fortunate to have, what we've been fortunate to have you and your family present in this community for generations, and how do we avoid losing that? So appreciate that. Those are really the main questions I have. I really want to open it up to our audience or to any other staff. We have a microphone if anyone from the audience, and then we can go online. If anyone has questions for our panelists or even for staff and kind of what we're doing with this information. Diane?
Thank you all for being here. It's very interesting, informative. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Thank you for sacrificing by farming. Clearly, that's a decision you've made with your families. Thank you. I'm an elected official in South Whitehall, and during the pandemic, I think our community had an opportunity to think a little more deeply about where your food comes from, and we all saw the supply chain issues. I personally have been contacted by some residents who've asked me, how many farms do we have, and how do we as a municipality help the people who live in our township? My question to you, thank you for suggesting a co-op. It's very interesting, something I had never thought of, but I have wondered why South Whitehall doesn't have a farmer's market. Is that something our residents would support? And is that something our local farmers would engage with us so that we could have that opportunity for our residents? My question for any of you, if you know the answer, as a municipality who hasn't done this yet, do you have any advice for us on whether that's a positive first step in helping partner with farmers to both educate and provide fresh local produce for our residents?
I can jump in a little bit. For us personally, at my farm, farmers markets don't work. I don't have enough resources or time to set up another location. We are swamped and busy with our location, what we're doing at our corn shed, and I don't have the resources I might have the resources to send you a product like Chad was saying with a co-op, but to take my employees or more employees to a farmer's market isn't quite feasible. You know, it sounds great, but it takes a lot of time, more employees, more work, and to be honest, at my point, I'm stressed enough. It's just another thing I got to deal with. You know, educating the community that we're here, come to us. That's what I'm more focused on. I think we have a lot of farm markets around. I don't think a lot of people know that they're there. I don't know that we need another farmer's market that more people have to travel to, but that's strictly just my opinion.
Yeah, I've definitely worked a lot of farmers markets in the last 7 years. Anywhere from Easton to West Reading, down in Bucks County, all over the place. And some are more well attended than others. And I think the well attended ones have community education as a highlight of what they focus on. But to Joel's point, it is so labor intensive to go to another farmer's market, right? You have to go to each of them. Luckily for us, our product, if we don't sell it, we just take it back and we sell it the next time. Whereas Kagan probably has a somewhat different experience. So I'll be really interested to hear what he has to say about that. But I think, you know, what I would love to see is, and again, these are pie in the sky things. So I understand the it's a whole lot easier to say than do. But to have a farm market similar to what Don and Joel have, that then what would be ideal is there's a company that actually goes around from farm to farm, picking up the product and taking it to that location. And then everyone knows to come there. And then the other thing that really facilitates is expanded operation hours for the public, which that's where the farmers markets fall short, is sometimes people can't make it during those 4 hours on Tuesday or the 4 hours on Saturday. But if you had something that's open 7 days a week, just like any grocery store would be, and the labor burden doesn't fall on the farmers for yet another farmers market, I think it would be difficult. It really would. It's a hard thing to do. What do you think?
I'm a little conflicted on this one because as someone who spent the first 4 years of my farming going to farmers markets probably every single Saturday and Sunday, it is a great place to connect with people and individually educate people one-on-one, but it is extremely labor intensive. We started out going to 3 farmers markets. We went down to 1 farmers market last year, and we're currently doing no farmers markets this year. That was mostly based on, like Chad said, I need to know how much I need to harvest and how much I need to put out on that day. And a farmer's market, that fluctuation, it makes it very hard to plan for, especially with a second full-time job. So We switched to a CSA model, which is a farm share. Basically, every week we have people who come and pick up a box of vegetables from June to the end of October. And that is kind of instead of doing a market, we kind of have like a community group, operates similar to market, but that's made it a lot easier both on the farming side, but also for people, since we have a few drop locations around the Lehigh Valley. So even something as simple as providing a drop location for a local CSA could be helpful. If you have a neighbor who's going to put a cooler out on their porch and reach out to a local farmer and say, I have 4 people around me who want that, we don't need I'd love to have a co-op. If we want to start one, the 3 of us, let's talk about it tonight. But we also can have like community-based co-ops where you can just be a drop point for a local farmer. If you want to get a half a beef cow together, you can all split it up on your front porch. Like it doesn't have to always be so centralized. We can do it just among ourselves too. So whether that's another market, what I do like about farmers markets, I'll say, especially with beginning farmers, is there is no pressure. You can bring what you have. If you only have 10 pounds of zucchini, you can show up with that. Whereas CSA, you need that amount every week. So it's all part of building up that ecosystem where those smaller farmers, or maybe those people who are still figuring it out, have a space to sell that would not be able to participate in a co-op because they're not at that scale. So I think it's important to have those options. We're just a little, I think, past the farmers markets as far as my own farm.
I just want to hit back on something you just said. I thought that was a really great point. Centralized co-op, because the centralization in this day and age could very easily take place virtually with a really great, easy to navigate website. That then, the dissemination is throughout, kind of decentralized, but it's one shop that's is virtual. And Jeff Bezos doesn't get any of the money.
So I like kind of expanding upon that idea with our virtual friend up here, Madeline, and kind of your organization. Do you see, is there any sort of connection to Buy Fresh, Buy Local that you can see in some of these ideas?
Well, yeah, I mean, first I'd say that a lot of the farmers and partners I've spoke with echoed what everyone has said with farmers markets being a really great resource when starting out and building community and having individual education opportunities. But then once you really start building up your business, it kind of becomes more inconvenient sometimes than beneficial. And also because you don't know how many people are going to show up. So you just spend all that time and money being at the market instead of farming. And then you might not really get a lot of sales that day for whatever reason. So I think farmers markets are really important for an opportunity for people to come and connect with farmers and face-to-face interactions, and that works really well for some farm models. But I think those farm models are becoming less and less present, especially because there's way less young farmers that are coming up because farm crop land is disappearing and all of that, all of these issues we've talked about all night. But I think I kind of lost my train of thought, to be honest. Yeah, go ahead.
That was gonna be one of my questions about you. You work with a lot of individual farmers, and
Yeah.
I was gonna ask if they are interested in looking for new markets, but it seems like that's not the trend, that they kind of have their established markets, if they even continue in that. The kind of follow-up is, how do you connect with, say, local farmers, and then whether it's a municipality that has a farmers market or looking to establish a CSA? Is that a role for Buy Fresh, Buy Local?
So yeah, we play less of the technical role, but more of the connecting role. So I had a winter meeting where I invited all of the farm partners to come, and we had a little panel where we had CSA different members talk about different topics that farmers were able to select. I send out a monthly farm partner newsletter, and so they were able to request a certain topic to hear from other farm partners. And so one of the topics was about CSAs and how that kind of has worked for different farm partners. And so we had a couple farmers talking about that, and that was really helpful to some of the other partners who are starting out in that way. So yes, we definitely play one of the biggest roles, I think, I play with the organization is to create space for connection and conversations and community. And I'm actually in an interesting, thank you, Chris, because you helped me to remember where I was going. I'm in an interesting point, I think, because I'm kind of seeing both sides. Like, we also have farmers markets that are partners. So I talk a lot with the farmers market managers. And so there's definitely an issue of supply and demand, because I think there, and I don't want to say that farmers markets aren't important, because they are super important, especially for new, like we had a new farm partner join us recently who was just starting out, and they're starting out at farmers markets, and that's how they're kind of building their consumer base. And that's like really important, and that shouldn't go away. But I think like our farmers markets are having issues where they're not getting enough farm partners, or having a trouble finding enough product to make it interesting for new people to come and then to become regulars, because there's not a lot of options. So farm market managers have had trouble of getting farm partners, and then farm partners aren't really interested in doing markets, because a lot of our farm partners are becoming more and more experienced and are dropping out of the markets. So that's kind of like an issue of supply and demand I've been seeing in the past year that I've been with the organization. So that to say, maybe farmers market for South Whitehall Township isn't the best way to go, but definitely continuing these conversations and looking into like regional food distribution hubs, like food co-ops, or like what, and I think one of the first steps in that is looking at what other communities are doing. And I could try to dig up some examples that I've seen. I'm not remembering the names of them, but there are different kind of organizations that have been doing that. I went to a conference and people talked about one where they had like over COVID, they had a digital market space where it was basically like a food co-op online. And the person I was talking to was saying it was a really awesome way to kind of like create that centralized space to sell product, and making it really convenient for the consumer while not like making it inconvenient for the farmer. So I think like definitely continuing that conversation, like if you're looking to kind of bring in a way to like a tangible way to create a space for selling and education, maybe that is kind of more the way to pivot and to research into.
One of the thoughts that I have is kind of the idea of the farmers market. I think, you know, we all go to farmers markets and we go for different reasons. If it's for the we know we're going there every week to get the specific produce that we want, and we want to make sure that we're going to that particular stand. Sometimes it's for the community value, connecting with some of our neighbors. Sometimes it's for I know I just go to take my son outside and get him to run around, and sometimes there's entertainment value. I like kind of one of the ideas that you talked about earlier, Madeline, of the kind of shared spaces. And I wonder if it's something to consider of a combination of like a community space that can also function as more of a co-op or a drop point or something like that, where it's not necessarily a defined market that we have to ensure that we have enough farmers that can commit to it and the burden on them, but it's kind of still that connecting point for education. And as part of that community space, it could be more of a gathering point for people and still have some of the benefits of markets that I think we all appreciate of connecting with our neighbors. Other questions from the audience?
Thanks very much. I want to thank you guys for being here. I know of you. The only one that I know of, because he passes below my house, is Joel. And if it's not you, it's one of your employees or it's your dad. I've seen your dad out in the field. So I do know the work that you do just right below my house. I want to thank you for being here. I'm going to share a big disappointment, because I think I have to get it off my chest. And I'm going to send that disappointment to our elected people who heard the same things that I heard when we were planning, when you guys were doing the comprehensive plan. And there was so much said about, we need farmland, we need to preserve, we need to do all of this. And my question is, where are they? Where are these individuals? Because they were very passionate, and they're not hearing what you have to say, which to me is a big disappointment. Hopefully with our elected officials, with our township commissioners, they'll get that information out to the people, but it's something different to actually hear it coming from each of you and what your issues are and what you'd like to see for the future, what your needs are. I understand where you're coming from with that. So just wanted to thank you for being here and sharing that information with all of us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Marie. My name is Sarah, and I'm part of the EAC here in South Whitehall Township with Marie. And my question is a little different. I'm just an ordinary citizen that lives here in South Whitehall, and I think a co-op sounds absolutely wonderful, and it's something that I know I would absolutely want to be a part of, and I know tons of mothers that would be right on that, right? And I think the big thing that each one of you touched on is the education piece. And I don't know whose job that would be to really pick up that ball and run with it. Is it South Whitehall? Is it, I mean, I would say yes, because we need to inform our people who live in this township what is going on. And, how do we inform people in a big way as to what's going on? And I don't know that answer, certainly, but unless you're really interested in a co-op or coming to a farmer's market that doesn't have tomatoes, in the winter, because a lot of farmers markets now still sell tomatoes in the winter. And it's part of that education piece that I think one of you touched on of, it's okay to make that sacrifice to not have that when the fruit is not in season, So I think for me, a big piece is education, and I don't know how that can happen. And certainly I'm not smart enough to have that answer, but if you're not gung-ho as far as to look for that information, I don't know where to find it even myself. Where do you go and find these farms that are willing to have a co-op, right? I mean, certainly I know you do now, but where do you find that it will slap you in the face, that you can find it easily and readily? Perhaps if we had some centralized online hub of all the farms that are willing to participate and say, okay, for this week, I have this many cabbages or whatever. I don't know. But I mean, so you don't have to feel that stress of a supply. You can put up there what you have, sell what you have, and then when it's gone for that week. And that would be a great way for local farms to be able to work together and connect. If we have one centralized online place to sell these goods, I don't know. But for me, it's education. I think, I'd like to know more, but I'd like everybody who's not interested in it to really get that awareness about it, because I think that people would like to do better. They just don't think about doing better. They just don't think about it. And so, yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, I'm done. Go ahead.
Yeah.
So I had a kind of another question that I think gets to part of what you're asking, Sarah, and that to anyone who else should we be talking to? I think we talked about this meeting being the what and the who, and grateful for all of you being here. But is there anyone else that we should be considering as a municipality reaching out to, trying to get involved with? And it could be organizations, it could be a type of person, whether it's, we need to work with our consumers or we need to work with our residents on education. Who else should we be involving in these discussions as we're going through the preservation plan, if anyone has ideas?
I'll just throw, we've talked a lot about education. I think the other thing we have to know is that this needs to be multi-generational. This is not a, hey, let's solve this problem and here's the solution, and hey, awesome. This is definitely multi-generational. So let's take the long view of it and let's start the education where the education starts, with the children, right? And so starting to have some of that education at that level, but looking at it across the entire segment of society, where are those touch points, just like you hit on earlier, we all eat, we all get food. How can we do a better job of marketing? This is obviously much bigger than South Whitehall. It's much bigger than Lehigh Valley, but I love that we're talking about it in our own backyard. And I think there are education opportunities. I think Buy Fresh, Buy Local, that's one of their main, kind of staples is to gather those farmers that everybody's so busy with, literally on the plow, that we need to gather the farmers together so there's one central hub. I think, with technology that we have at our disposal these days, I think it's just the matter of connecting the right people to market that correctly. That's another thing that farmers are not particularly great at, is marketing and getting their brand out there. And how do you do that? And what's your social media presence and all of those things. But again, I think this is the right first step. How do we build momentum? Well, we build momentum by all of you going home and talking to your friends. Talk to 2 or 3 friends and talk to them about some of these ideas and how we can support local farming in our own backyard, quite literally. And then, start to think about your own personal ecosystem too, because it can start with you. What can you do? Can you do more composting at home? Can you grow some of your own produce and vegetables? I would strongly encourage you to do some of those things, because what you start to find out is it's hard. Yeah, it's hard. It really is. So it's a long way between, saying and doing. That's a long walk, right? And that's okay, because that's how we learn and that's how we can implement these things. But we only have a handful here, but we know a handful and they know a handful. So let's just keep it going. And I think this is exactly what townships are for, is to gather the community to take care of and preserve things for future generations. So let's look at the long term on this.
Tim, do you have a question? Or are you just going to brag about your local garden?
No, yeah, I'm not going to talk about my farm. No, I think just one point maybe to circle back around to, it's more of a comment. So several of the panel talked about it earlier. The co-ops are great. Farmers markets are great. Buying local is great. But if we don't have the land, we lose that opportunity. And in the land protection model, this imbalance, this gap between protecting land as open space or selling it for the highest value for the short term, is a real challenge. So a thought that I've had for a long time in land protection is how to monetize or value open space staying open, whether it's uses for agriculture, natural resources, forest land, whatever it may be, because the community services that come from these open spaces don't have a dollar sign attached to them at the current rate that we're at. Right now, it's what's the best use. It's going to be how much can you develop this land for? What can you sell it for per acre? Versus how is this land staying in agriculture going to support the health of the community, the people, the animals, the plants for generations to come? Once we lose it, we lose it. It's hard to turn it back. So I think from the township level, and then maybe spanning out to county or even on to state level, is looking at some planning or some theories on how can we monetize or increase the value for a landowner to keep their land as the way it is right now versus changing that land use for the long term.
It's a great comment, Tim. And certainly, kind of what we're hoping to get to with this and how we can do that as a township. And I think it's extremely relevant here in this particular township because of the land values and the continuing growing land values. I know there's often a lot of good faith behind a lot of this, and we talk about things like the return on investment or return on environment, as it's often called, and there's a lot of studies that support the value of open space in a community, and that's great for the community. But I think to more of your question, how does that help the individual landowner? How can we actually make it easier for them to look at the dollars that are being offered for their property and their open space? And it's, yes, I'd love to continue to support the value of my neighboring property owners by leaving this open, but how can we add more to figure out making that decision easier for them? I think it's a great question and a great challenge. And as someone who's worked in land preservation for a long time, it's definitely still a big challenge.
I just had a question for the panel. It just came to me as we were talking. I know there was a slogan that was around for a long time, get to know your farmer. And so I guess I would ask each of you, having heard about what your day is like, what your week is like, all of the work that you have to do, what would you suggest? How can we get to know you? I've talked with Joel on the phone. I've seen him go by. I see him working. But do I really know, other than when I came here tonight, some of what you're telling me? I knew you farmed a lot of land. I didn't know it was that much. So each of you is very busy. Is there value, and I'm thinking there is, but maybe not, in getting to know your farmer?
For me personally, we use social media. Facebook has been great for us and for our market. And we love interacting with our customers through that portal. You know, they'll send messages and I get it right on my phone, and we try to respond as well as we can and as quick as we can. And social media has just been a big benefit, you know, and I think we use that a lot personally on our farm.
We've had a ton of success also with social media, getting just like little messages from people that we work with. It's just like, we had the wildfire smoke and someone was like, hey, just sending hugs today, or just like people randomly checking in is nice, but also too, coming out to the farm. I feel like anytime, it's a little different. We're mostly hand scale. We're not riding tractors around. So if you come out, we're probably walking somewhere on the property. So just come out and see it. I think one of the biggest pluses, or one of the biggest advantages on talking about getting people educated, is we were able to leave farmers markets because we were able to build up our CSA program. And we were able to build up our CSA program because 2/3 of people who join a CSA, even if they leave that farm, will join another one. So every time you can get somebody into that CSA model, get them in the habit of picking up vegetables from a specific farmer every day of the week, or one day every week, you've basically forever changed how, you have a 66% chance that you forever changed how that person acquires food. And I think that was a pretty powerful argument for us to scale down on the farmers markets, but scale up on the CSA side. And I think it's because we can, like I call it eating through the seasons, where I can take you from our early spring kale to our storage crops in around Christmas. So I think that side of it too is definitely helpful.
Yeah, I would add, I think this is a perfect opportunity to do showcases and highlights, whether that's through town hall communications like this, whether it's through, maybe a Know Your Farmer on WFMZ spot, or social media posts like Joel is saying, but more, within the community, not just the farmer putting that stuff out, but the community showcasing that farm and that farmer and their purpose. I think understanding that would be the very first question I would ask a farmer is, what is your purpose? I think that goes a long way to figuring out if that's aligned with where you want to be. And I think this is a perfect way. I like the question a lot. I think it's a perfect way to start the education, because people love to know about people. And those are the stories when we post on social. It's not the new bourbon that gets the most likes. It's the, Tessa, our manager's new baby that we welcomed on board. That's who gets it's the people connection. So the people and the purpose, and communicating that through mechanisms. I don't know what you have, if there's, blasts that you send out to your constituents in your community. But yeah, having a content calendar that's thoughtful and purposeful, that literally every other week you're introducing a farmer, and maybe it's more seasonal. Maybe as you get towards the holidays, it's a Christmas tree farm, whatever. But, make it a seasonal, thoughtful, deliberate thing, because you guys know how this works. If we don't have a plan, we just don't do it. But I think that's a great way to open those conversations, for sure. Go to Open Gate Farms when they do those tours as well. So go out there and meet those farmers and see their farms. See if it's something that resonates with you.
Yeah, I can definitely, speak to it's been a pleasure getting to kind of meet all of you and get to know you, and it's certainly been inspiring. And for some of you, I appreciate your business, but like getting to meet you, I appreciate it so much more. One of the questions that I have is really, Joel, you've been established in the township, but maybe this is more towards, like Chad or even Kagan. Like, what are some of the things that you look for as a farmer or a business looking to come into an area, what are the things that would attract you to coming to a community to set up shop, so to speak? And what are some of the biggest fears that you have, or some of the biggest things that you would want to know before consideration? Because we have great soils, so.
I would say if you're looking just strictly at the studies they do for, usually you use the stereotypical CSA customer, is a female with a college degree who has a combined annual income of over $100,000. That is your CSA customer, and probably local food customer mostly. So that would probably be one of the first places I looked. We're moving our farm from Emmaus to Bethlehem Township, where we're again essentially surrounded by that demographic. So that, just strictly looking at like a stereotypical number side of it, would be the first thing.
Absolutely nailed it. I mean, it's a demographic search first and foremost, and it's looking for alignment. If the community is not aligned with what your vision and your purpose is, then it's just not going to work. You can try to force it, but it won't last over time, I don't think. So I think you have to have that alignment with your community, that you're doing the things they find important, and vice versa. So yeah, we were fortunate enough to find, I consider all of this kind of our hometown. I consider Lehigh Valley our hometown. And we're very much aligned with folks here. Folks are concerned about where their food comes from, grown, and who's growing it. And again, we're really, really fortunate. That is not the truth everywhere. So that's very encouraging, I think.
So one of the questions I had, and I don't know if we had a purposeful alignment of our panel, but we have small scale farmer, large scale farmer, business operator. And when I'm listening, I have a million ideas and a million notes, and I'll be busy for a while digesting everything. But one of the things I wanted to know is, we've talked internally about like what the sweet spot for your operations are. So like Joel, what's the minimum or the ideal size plot of land for you to farm? Chad, what's the ideal size of a farm to have a distillery? And Keegan, what's the ideal size for a vegetable farm for people coming out of the seed farm? So that's one of the things that I was kind of curious about.
I'll go first. For us, we can farm any size field. We farm half-acre pieces, and we farm, I think I have one 100-acre field. We have a lot of technology in our equipment that we can be any scale. For us, it's just proximity to our current farm. We don't like to spend hours on the road driving to another field from here to here. So the more centralized we can be to our current farm, the better it is. And as a solid number, 10 acres or more is obviously helpful.
Yeah, for us, really, there's a couple different ways, and let me come back to the, what can South Whitehall do? We have a true, every single piece of grain that you guys drink out of our bottle comes from that guy right there. Every single grain, every piece. So that is something that we could easily be located here, so that maybe it's the value add component of the farmer that is using land in maybe other areas that aren't South Whitehall Township. But the value add piece, the baker, the brewer, the distiller, that can certainly be, and it's beneficial for them to be located closer to the consumer, right? And that was kind of one of our thoughts about being located in Nutropoli, actually, is we had a place picked out in Bethlehem, and we wanted to be a farm distillery and actually grow grains, be associated with the people that are growing the grains. And what we decided to be was closer to the source, not closer to the consumer, and let the consumer come out and be part of that environment. And that worked for our model, but you can see just within the valley with all the brewers and wineries and distilleries that are in the valley, they're typically more concentrated on where the consumers So I think your question is kind of in that vein, right?
Yeah, it's really looking at, when in zoning, we have use schedules and, minimum lot sizes or maximum lot size and that kind of thing. And if there's ways that we can create, the ideal parcel, whether it's incentivizing warehousing to set aside 10% for farming, what is that, if there's a magic number size wise, for something like that.
That's a tough one, isn't it? Because it really does depend on, I'm thinking about we're starting to do some of our stuff on 25 acres that includes more of that whole ecosystem. But we certainly can't do that without what Don and Joel bring to the table already. And then other distilleries or breweries, they don't have any real connection right to the ground. They're just sourcing it from around. And I think maybe that's another component, is how do we get the businesses to source locally as opposed to buying their grain from Bryce, which is just an online thing from, it's sourcing Canadian barley. How do we get that, grow fantastic barley? They have two-row barley that would far exceed most expectations, and it's grown right here. So, maybe that's another component of this is connecting the businesses to the farmers, not just the end consumer, but the businesses to the farmers, and having that layer in there as well.
That business to farmer side is huge. I say we got rid of our markets and switched to a CSA. We are CSA and wholesale. So I would say about a third of our business is selling directly to chefs. And a lot of that is consumer driven. It's people who want to see a farm name on the menu. They ask where you source some of this produce from. They're kind of interested in asking those questions. But again, it goes back to the education side, where you need the people who are ready to ask those questions or ready to have that conversation. So at least on your question about lot size, you were at the seed farm. There's a woman running a very successful half-acre flower farm right now. It's her first year. Hopefully her second year, she's able to quit her full-time job and continue to farm on half an acre. So on the small scale side, of the direct consumer side, anywhere between half an acre to, I don't see myself ever farming more than 10 acres of vegetables. I'm going to retire before I do an 11th acre. No way. So probably, half to 10 acres is really, I think, the sweet spot for most beginning farmers, most young farmers. Really 6 to 7 acres is their ideal plan, even in their head. So they'll start much, much smaller, but even their grandest scale is less than 10 acres.
On that point real quick, because you just hit a really good point about the chefs and the people, the consumers that go to the restaurants, to the breweries, to the distilleries, to wherever, asking those questions. What is this sourced locally? And do not settle for the answer. We try to source as much as we can locally. Don't settle for that answer. That's a generic answer. What do you source locally? From where? How often? Let's get detailed about that. Trying to source locally is not the answer. It's what do you source locally?
Do you see a role for the municipality to help with those, farmer to business connections, and how can we do that, and how can we do that better? I mean, how did you guys get connected, I guess? Okay, yeah. So it's
we had one thing at the distillery maybe 5 years ago, and it was called How Green Is My Valley, and it was in kind of a partnership with L-Tri-C in a kind of a little loose way. And it was just that opportunity to try to bring in the local butcher, the local distiller, the local vegetable grower, and have people come out for a cocktail that typically gets people at the table. And then having those conversations about, did you know that Rainbow Farms is right here? Did you know that? Did you know that, Bad Dairy Farm is just down the road and you can get milk 24/7 and a whoopie pie? Did you know that? I mean, how green is our valley? We don't even know how green it is. So maybe some of those connections, maybe it's a workshop that's done. This is a beautiful space, by the way.
Yeah.
South Whitehall has a very nice township building. But, this is a great space. So maybe it is a working group with business owners, with farmers, with consumers to have conversations just like this, because it is truly, Don and Joel and myself know each other because we work with other people within this community, and whoever put community up there for farming, that is it. That is 100% it. It's been that way for centuries. It will be that way for centuries more. What brings the people together is the agriculture. Agriculture, the soil health is the start of that community. And the more we talk about it and the more we bring people to the table, the more diverse we get, the better. So, yeah, it's fun, right? This is great.
I have more of a comment. I've been thinking about outreach. You had mentioned outreach, and there's only a handful of people here, which is disappointing, but outreach is still the key, I think. And I'm just wondering if, we have newsletters, and maybe we could profile local farmers on those newsletters. Maybe the fall, winter, we could do more of the ones that concentrate on pumpkins and trees and things like that, and spring more of the vegetables and the flowers and so forth. But I'm also wondering if our website, we could have just a page dedicated to, did you know that they're here? And then maybe on that page have a link that would link to each of your businesses. And maybe we could even reach out to our neighboring municipalities. This is what we're planning on doing. Would you do it with us so that the whole area has that page, that link? And also talking about outreach, I think kids and students, that's very important too. I don't know what the schools offer. That's not under my purview. But I know we do have summer camps and we have academies. And maybe there's a way to introduce the kids, and maybe it's already happening. I don't know. In my day, we had explorer posts, and we would spend time, either on farms, in hospitals, with police, whatever we wanted to do, just to explore it and see if that was something we wanted to do in the future. But I'm just wondering if, our youth camps or something that would be,
Yeah.
a day on the farm, or I know that's time for you and it's taking away from what you want to do, but I don't know. It's just thoughts. I'm just trying to get that outreach out there.
I think I need to talk to Madeline more. It sounds like, because I think that's thinking of working smarter, not harder, and for me, and just consuming my time, I could pass off some of that to Madeline, but I just think that there's already that great connection with so many people that she's working with, that maybe what we could be doing is trying to connect with that organization who already has that network of local farms, who already has the wonderful book that I love of, where you can go to get locally sourced food, where you can go to certain farmers markets, and then have that be, featured as something of a part of the connection to our residents, to say, hey, did you know that Newards is just down the road? Yeah, and the other piece of it, I think, is just being able to kind of promote it as something that's ingrained in the community. It kind of sounds like I think of like someone had mentioned the farm tours, the open gate farm tours. Those are so interesting if you've never been on one. I don't know if we have any farms in South Whitehall that we do that. I mean, but I think just looking to promote that and getting people connected with agriculture, and that's kind of an existing thing already. But yeah, I know it's great if you can go out for the day and just kind of walk around on a farm and hear directly, and then it's less of a burden on the farmer because it's already an established, they open up the whole day and they love when people come. But yeah, it's a great comment.
I thanks for that shout out, Chris. Yeah, so we put out a monthly newsletter and have our local food guide, and the newsletter is actually kind of exactly what you're talking about. It talks about what's in season, where you can get it, like the importance of that, has fun facts, and I'm constantly like evolving that. I'm not saying by any means that's like the best newsletter ever or anything. It definitely probably could be improved upon, but it's what I've attempted to do to create some sort of consistent connection to those resources. The difference I think between, like, so we have a partnership base, so we have like community farms and organizations and local foods that kind of pay into the partnership base. So we try to focus on those partners. But I like the idea of, I don't know what your website platform is like, but for municipalities to have a spot to connect, or to even just say, like, these are the farms in our township, because by no means do we represent all farmers, like, at all, because we have like about 100 partners, which is significant, but there's way more local food businesses out there than those that we're representing or connected to. So that would be a cool way to be inclusive of like who's in that immediate township or neighboring townships, and then being able to collaborate with other municipalities. And like, in terms of like the farm tours or going into schools and educating, that's something we are always thinking about too. And something that we were talking about earlier about like get to know your farmer, and that being a slogan. We are working on developing promotion for like partner spotlights or point of view from a farmer's perspective or partner's perspective. So that is something in the works. I mean, I'm one person in this organization, so I'm always trying to think about like what I actually have time for to do in a feasible manner. But working with partners and working with municipalities to have these conversations and to like develop these programs, and this conversation is really great and helpful for me to know what like our community's priorities are and our partners' priorities are, because then I go and I apply to grant funds and things to help start creating these resources in the community. But yeah, definitely follow us on our social media pages, and these farmers on their social media pages, and then sign up for our newsletter and those sorts of things. Great ways to connect, and always open to feedback. So if you go and read the newsletter, like, I wish I had this, let me know, and I can like figure out how that might work with our current models.
Yeah, I really hope that this is, not just a one-time thing, that this is really the start of these conversations, as, a community conversation, but also, continuing conversations with all of you, and in ways that we can kind of implement some of this stuff. And so I'm just so grateful for everyone who has come out tonight for this, who has agreed to speak, and we're grateful for all you do. We're kind of running up on the 2-hour mark. Are there any other burning questions, anyone from online or in the audience, that you want to ask of our panelists? And not really seeing any, we can kind of start to talk about the next steps here. So first, can we just have a round of applause for our panelists? Yeah. Thank you all again. I really have appreciated getting to know you and starting these conversations. I have pages and pages and pages of notes, and as Dave kind of said, we'll be busy for a while. The next thing that we're going to do, kind of as a follow-up, what we want to kind of ask of the community is, if you signed in, please put your email on there. And if you didn't sign in, please give your email. We want to follow up with kind of just a preferences survey. And this is just like a quick run through of just some random images. And it helps give us an idea of some of the ideas that we talked about tonight, things like community or co-ops and CSAs. And we talked about, distilleries, wineries, all the different aspects of agriculture. We're trying to just get an idea of, what are some of the things you like, and then we'll add in some of the ability to have some comments in there about some of the things you heard. It's a lot to kind of unpack in 2 hours, so we hope that there's more follow-up. Please feel free to follow up through this, or reach out if you have any other questions or comments. And then, as I mentioned in the beginning, this is really the first of our 3 resource meetings. Next week is here in the public meeting room. We'll be talking specifically about the natural resources. So we'll be giving more of like a presentation on that, and talking about some of the things that we have already in the township, ways that we can preserve those, ways that residents and citizens can think about preserving resources in their community. And then the day after that, Tuesday will be a little bit more detailed in getting into the resources, but on Wednesday, down at Covered Bridge Park, we'll be having an event just really more geared towards kids and families, and this is to kind of connect with your watershed, and we'll have some basic watershed education there that kind of dovetails into the natural resources. And then on Tuesday, August 29th, We're back here in this meeting room, and 6 to 8 p.m., that's when we're getting into historic resources. So if you attended the first meeting with us, you got to meet our consultant working on this plan, Jeff Marshall, who just has a tremendous background in preserving historic resources, and we'll be talking more about some of the historic aspects of this and kind of wrapping them all up together and hopefully developing some great goals and programs and policies out of this plan. But I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. Are there any other questions for us? Yes. Yes, I hope everyone's okay with that. I should have asked that earlier, but no, certainly for our notes, but I think we'll probably get a lot of views as well, and we can kind of promote that to the audience that wasn't here tonight. So, but that's all I have, unless we have anything else. So, thank you, everyone.